What would you do if you had just 15 seconds left before your entire world disappeared? Imagine this. It's a beautiful summer morning. You're going about your day, maybe heading to work, maybe at home with your family. The sun is shining. Children are playing in the streets. Everything feels normal. And then, in less time than it takes to tie your shoelaces, everything you've ever known ceases to exist. This is the story of August 6th, 1945. The day one bomb killed over 140,000 people. The day the world changed forever. But more than that, this is the story of the people who were there, the survivors who saw things no human being should ever have to see. And I'm going to tell you what it was really like to be inside Hiroshima when the atomic bomb fell. Before we dive in, I need you to understand something. This isn't just history. These were real people, real families, real children, and what happened to them that morning is almost impossible to comprehend. But we need to talk about it. We need to remember, because forgetting would be the greatest tragedy of all. So stay with me. This is going to be intense, but it's a story that deserves to be told. Let's go back to the beginning. It's August 5th, 1945. The evening before the bomb. Hiroshima is a city of about 350,000 people. It's located on the southwestern coast of Japan, sitting on the delta of the Otta River. The city spreads across several islands connected by bridges, with mountains rising up in the distance. Now, by this point in World War II, most major Japanese cities have been absolutely devastated by American firebombing campaigns. Tokyo? Nearly destroyed. Osaka, burned to the ground. Nagoya, obliterated. But Hiroshima has been largely untouched. And the people living there know this is strange. They're not stupid. They can see what's happening to other cities. They know the Americans are getting closer. They know the war's going badly for Japan. So why hasn't Hiroshima been bombed like everywhere else? Some people whisper that maybe the Americans are saving the city for some special purpose. Others think perhaps the United States Secretary of War has relatives in Hiroshima and is protecting it. There are all these theories floating around. The truth, of course, is far more sinister than anyone could imagine. Hiroshima has been deliberately preserved as a target. The American military wants an intact city to properly measure the destructive power of their new weapon. But the people of Hiroshima don't know this yet. On this particular evening, a 16-year-old girl named Setsuko Thurlow is at home with her family. She's a student, bright and ambitious, dreaming of a future beyond the war. Her nephew, a 4-year-old boy she adores, is staying with them. Across town, a man named Akihiro Takahashi is preparing for another day of school. He's 13 years old, part of a student mobilization program where kids are pulled out of regular classes to help with the war effort. In another part of the city, Dr. Michihiko Hachiya is finishing up his work at the communications hospital. He's the hospital director, a dedicated physician who's been treating patients throughout the war. And in the Hiroshima Red Cross Hospital, Dr. Terufumi Sasaki is on duty. At 25 years old, he's the only uninjured doctor in the city who will be able to provide medical care in the aftermath of what's about to happen. These people have no idea that they're about to become witnesses to something unprecedented in human history. None of them know that at this very moment, on a tiny island called Tinian, about 1,500 miles away, American airmen are making final preparations to load a bomb onto a B-29 bomber. They call the bomb Little Boy. It's about 10 feet long, 28 inches in diameter, and weighs about 9,700 pounds. Inside is about 141 pounds of uranium-235. When detonated, it will release the equivalent of 15,000 tons of TNT. The bomber is called the Enola Gay, named after the pilot's mother. Colonel Paul Tibbets will be flying the mission, along with a crew of 12 men. They take off just after 2:45 in the morning on August 6th. The flight to Hiroshima takes about 6 hours. let me paint you a picture of what Hiroshima looks like that morning. It's a Monday. The weather is absolutely gorgeous. Clear blue skies, warm sunshine, barely a cloud visible. The temperature is already climbing toward what will be a hot summer day. People are waking up, starting their daily routines. The city is alive with activity. Workers are heading to factories and offices. The streetcars are running their routes, packed with commuters. Shopkeepers are opening their stores. Mothers are preparing breakfast for their families. And children, there are so many children. See, because of the war, thousands of school children have been mobilized to help with various tasks. Some are working in factories. Others are clearing fire breaks, creating wide-open spaces in the city where fires hopefully won't be able to spread if the Americans do eventually attack. These kids, ranging from about 11 to 16 years old, are scattered all across Hiroshima that morning. They're outside, in the open, completely exposed. Remember Akihiro Takahashi, the 13-year-old I mentioned? He's at school right now, standing in the schoolyard with his classmates during morning assembly. They're lined up in neat rows, listening to the principal give instructions for the day. Setsuko Thurlow, the 16-year-old girl, has already left her house and reported to her work assignment at the Army headquarters building in the center of the city. She's in a room with about 30 other girls, all around her age, being briefed on their tasks for the day. At exactly 7:09 a.m., an air raid alert sounds across the city. American B-29 bombers have been spotted approaching. Everyone stops what they're doing. Some people head to bomb shelters, others just watch the sky nervously. But here's the thing about air raid alerts by this point in the war. They happen all the time. Japanese radar picks up American planes constantly. Sometimes they attack, sometimes they're just doing reconnaissance. Most of the time, nothing happens. So when the all-clear sounds at 7:31 a.m., people breathe a sigh of relief and go back to their normal activities. Everything seems fine. The planes they detected were actually weather reconnaissance aircraft, checking conditions over potential target cities. One of them flew over Hiroshima and sent back a report. Conditions excellent. Clear visibility. Perfect for the mission. The Enola Gay is already in the air, approaching Japanese airspace. At around 8 a.m., Hiroshima's radar operators detect what appears to be a small formation of aircraft approaching the city. Maybe 2 or 3 planes. But here's the thing. By August 1945, the Japanese have learned that the Americans typically don't waste huge bombing raids on small targets. Major air raids involve hundreds of bombers darkening the sky. 2 or 3 planes. That's probably just reconnaissance. Not worth sounding another air raid alert and disrupting everyone's day, so they don't sound the alarm. This decision will haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. The Enola Gay, along with 2 escort planes carrying scientific instruments and cameras, approaches Hiroshima completely unopposed. No air raid sirens, no warning, nothing. People are just living their lives. A mother is hanging laundry to dry in the sun. A father is heading to work, thinking about what he needs to accomplish that day. A child is laughing, playing with friends in the street. Inside the Enola Gay, the crew is making final preparations. They're flying at about 31,000 feet, higher than most people in Hiroshima have ever seen a plane. From the ground, if anyone even notices them, the aircraft look like tiny silver specks in the bright blue sky. At 8:15 a.m., the bombardier, Major Thomas Farabee, looks through his bomb sight and identifies the target, the Aioi Bridge, a distinctive T-shaped bridge in the center of the city. He releases the bomb. Little Boy falls from the Enola Gay's bomb bay and begins its descent toward Hiroshima. The plane immediately banks hard, turning away as steeply as possible. The crew knows they need to get at least 8 miles away from the detonation point to avoid being caught in the blast. The bomb falls for 43 seconds. 43 seconds. That's all the time the people of Hiroshima have left before everything changes. Before their city, their lives, their entire world is obliterated. but they don't know it's coming. Imagine you're standing in Hiroshima right now. It's 8:15 in the morning. You might glance up and see a bright flash in the sky, brighter than anything you've ever seen. Brighter than 1,000 suns, witnesses will later say. Some people who were looking up at the moment of detonation had the images of the city streets literally burned into their retinas. That's how bright it was. But most people don't see the flash. They're going about their business, not looking at the sky. What they experience next is impossible to prepare for. Little boy detonates 1,900 feet above the city, almost directly over the Shima surgical clinic. The bomb explodes with a force equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT, creating a fireball that reaches temperatures of over 1 million degrees Celsius at its core. For context, the surface of the sun is about 5,500 degrees Celsius. This fireball is almost 200 times hotter than the sun's surface. The thermal radiation from the blast spreads outward at the speed of light. Within a mile of the hypocenter, every exposed surface is instantly heated to over 3,000 degrees Celsius. Human beings within half a mile of ground zero are vaporized instantly. Not burned, not killed. Vaporized, turned into shadows and ash in a fraction of a second. If you were walking across a bridge or standing in an open street within this radius, you literally ceased to exist as a physical being. The only trace you left behind was your shadow, burned into the pavement or a wall where your body blocked the thermal radiation for that split second before you were gone. These shadows still exist in Hiroshima today. You can see them. A person sitting on a set of stone steps. Someone standing by a wall. Frozen moments of the last seconds of thousands of lives. But the thermal radiation is just the beginning. 1 to 2 seconds after detonation, the blast wave arrives. Imagine a wall of compressed air moving at over 600 miles per hour, smashing into everything in its path. The overpressure at ground zero is estimated at about 19 pounds per square inch. That might not sound like much, but think about it this way. Your eardrums rupture at about 5 pounds per square inch of overpressure. Buildings don't just collapse, they're pulverized, turned into splinters and dust. Wooden structures are ripped from their foundations and scattered like toothpicks. Concrete buildings are crushed, steel is twisted and warped. Glass from every window in the city becomes deadly projectiles, shooting through the air like bullets. And the people are thrown through the air like rag dolls. Bodies are shredded by flying debris. Anyone caught in the open is slammed into the ground with devastating force. Now let's go back to those people we were following. Remember Akihiro Takahashi, the 13-year-old boy standing in his school courtyard? He sees the flash. Just for a moment, everything turns brilliant white. Then he feels himself lifted off the ground and thrown backward. He crashes into something, he's not sure what, and everything goes dark. When he regains consciousness, he has no idea how much time has passed. Seconds? Minutes? He can't tell. He tries to stand up and realizes his skin is hanging off his arms in sheets. His face feels like it's on fire. He's been burned so badly that his features are barely recognizable. But he's alive. Setsuko Thurlow, the 16-year-old girl in the Army headquarters building, experiences something different. She's inside a reinforced concrete structure when the bomb detonates. She sees the flash through the window, that brilliant, impossible light. Then everything goes black. The building collapses on top of her and the other girls in the room. She's trapped under rubble, crushed in a space so tight she can barely breathe. She can hear the other girls screaming around her, calling out for their mothers, crying in pain and terror. She's convinced she's going to die here. Dr. Hachia is at home, about a mile from the hypocenter, when the bomb explodes. He's standing near a window about to get dressed for the day. The flash comes first, then his house disintegrates around him. He's thrown across the room, impaled by pieces of wood and glass. He can feel blood running down his face, his arms, his legs. He's bleeding from dozens of wounds, but he's alive. And as a doctor, his first thought, even as he's bleeding and injured, is that he needs to get to the hospital. People will need help. He doesn't yet understand the scale of what's happened. Dr. Sasaki is at the Red Cross hospital when the explosion occurs. He's in the laboratory, examining a blood sample under a microscope. The blast wave hits the hospital hard, but the building doesn't completely collapse. Dr. Sasaki is thrown to the ground, cut by flying glass, but not seriously injured. Within seconds, he hears screaming, so much screaming. When he looks outside, he sees people flooding toward the hospital from all directions. Thousands of people, burned, bleeding, stumbling, crawling, and he's about to become the only doctor capable of treating them. Let me describe to you what Hiroshima looks like 90 seconds after the bomb detonated. The entire center of the city has been obliterated. About 5 square miles of urban area have been reduced to burning rubble. Of the 76,000 buildings in Hiroshima, approximately 70,000 are damaged or destroyed. The characteristic mushroom cloud is rising into the sky, climbing to over 40,000 feet. It's massive, dark, shot through with fire and lightning. People miles away can see it and have no idea what they're looking at. On the ground, everything is fire and chaos. The thermal radiation has ignited countless fires across the city. Broken gas lines are burning. Destroyed homes are ablaze. The firestorm is just beginning, and it will rage for hours. But what strikes survivors the most, in their initial moments of consciousness after the blast, is the silence. Think about it. A city of 350,000 people has just been devastated. Tens of thousands have been killed instantly. Tens of thousands more are dying. And yet, many survivors describe this eerie, heavy silence in the immediate aftermath. Why? Because anyone close enough to make noise is dead. Vaporized, crushed, burned beyond recognition in those first seconds. But then, as survivors start to regain consciousness, the silence breaks. And what replaces it is worse than anything you can imagine. Screaming, crying, moaning, people calling out for help, for water, for their families. The word you hear over and over again in survivor testimonies is mizu, water. Everyone is desperately thirsty. The thermal radiation has caused horrific burns, and the victims' bodies are desperately dehydrated. Mizu, mizu, please. Water. Children are wandering through the ruins, crying for their parents. Parents are frantically searching through the rubble for their children. And the injuries, I need to be honest with you about what the survivors looked like, because this is important to understand. This is the reality of nuclear weapons. People's skin is literally melting off their bodies. It hangs in strips from their arms and faces. Their eyes are swollen shut or blown out of their sockets. Hair is burned away. Clothes are either completely gone or burned into the flesh. Many people are so badly burned that you can't tell if they're male or female. You can't recognize individual features. They look like walking corpses, stumbling through the ruins. There's a specific Japanese word that survivors use to describe these victims. Ants walking. Because that's what they looked like from a distance. Columns of burned people, moving slowly, arms held out in front of them because it hurts too much to let their damaged skin touch anything. Many of these people are walking toward the rivers that run through Hiroshima. They're desperate for water. They're desperate to cool their burning flesh. The rivers will soon be clogged with bodies. Remember Akihiro Takahashi, the 13-year-old boy? He manages to stand up and realizes his entire class has been devastated. His friends are burned, screaming, dying around him. His teacher, somehow still alive, yells at the students who can still walk to head for the river. They need to escape the fires spreading through the ruins of the school. Akihiro starts walking. He can't use his hands because the skin is hanging off them. His face is swelling from the burns, but he walks, following his classmates toward the Ota River. On the way, he sees things that will haunt him for the rest of his life. He passes a woman holding her baby. Both of them are burned beyond recognition. The woman is crying, begging for help, but Akihiro can't do anything. He's barely able to keep himself moving forward. He sees horses running through the streets, their backs on fire, screaming in agony. He sees a child, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing alone in the rubble, skin peeling off, calling out for their mother. When Akihiro finally reaches the river, he collapses. The cool water feels like heaven against his burned skin, but he's so weak now. He's going into shock from his injuries. He thinks he's going to die here. Meanwhile, Setsuko Thurlow is still trapped under the collapsed army headquarters building. She can't move. The weight of the rubble is crushing her. She's certain she's going to die here, buried alive while the fires spread closer. But then she hears a voice, a man's voice, calling out in Japanese, "Don't give up. Keep pushing. I can see sunlight." She doesn't know who this man is. She never learns his identity. But he's somehow managed to create a small opening in the rubble, and he's encouraging the trapped girls to crawl toward it. Setsuko pushes with everything she has. Her muscles are screaming. She can barely breathe, but she inches forward, toward that small patch of light. Finally, she breaks through. When she emerges from the ruins, she can't believe what she sees. The entire city is gone. Just gone. Flattened. Burning. She looks around frantically for the other girls she was with. She can hear some of them still trapped, still screaming for help. But the fires are getting closer, and the man who helped her escape is pulling her away. "We have to go," he tells her. "We can't help them now." She hears the other girls burning to death behind her as she runs. She will remember their screams for the rest of her life. Dr. Hachiya, bleeding from multiple wounds, is trying to make his way to the communications hospital where he works. His wife is with him, also injured. The streets are impassable. Rubble everywhere. Fires spreading. And people, so many injured people, begging for help. He tries to assist them as he passes, but there are too many. And he's injured himself, weak from blood loss. When he finally reaches the hospital, he discovers that the building is damaged but still partly standing. Staff members are trying to organize some kind of response, but they're overwhelmed. Patients are flooding in faster than anyone can treat them. The hospital is designed to hold maybe 200 patients. Within hours, thousands will crowd into the building and the grounds around it. Dr. Hachiya collapses. His injuries are worse than he realized. He needs to be treated before he can help anyone else. Dr. Sasaki at the Red Cross Hospital is in a similar situation, except he's not as badly injured, which means he's one of the only doctors capable of providing medical care. By 9 a.m., just 45 minutes after the bomb, there are already over 10,000 wounded people at the Red Cross Hospital. The number will continue to grow throughout the day. Dr. Sasaki moves through the chaos like a machine. He has no time to think, no time to process what's happened. He just moves from patient to patient, doing what he can. Bandaging wounds, pulling glass from flesh, trying to stop bleeding, but he has almost no supplies. The hospital's resources are already depleted from years of war. He doesn't have enough bandages, enough medicine, enough of anything, and the injuries are beyond anything in his medical training. These aren't normal wounds. These are burns like nothing he's ever seen. Radiation injuries that he doesn't even understand yet. People are dying faster than he can treat them, so he works for 3 straight days without sleeping, treating patient after patient, while bodies pile up in the hospital corridors around him. Now you might be wondering, what about the Japanese government? What about the military? Where's the organized response? Here's the thing, there isn't one. Not at first. Communication in and out of Hiroshima has been completely destroyed. The telephone lines are down, the telegraph system isn't working, the radio station has been obliterated. The Japanese government in Tokyo knows something happened. At about 8:16 a.m., they suddenly lost all contact with Hiroshima. But they don't know what. They assume it was a conventional bombing raid. Maybe a large one, but nothing outside the scope of what they've already experienced in other cities. It isn't until several hours later, when a reconnaissance plane flies over Hiroshima and radios back a report, that officials begin to understand the scale of the destruction. The entire city has been destroyed by a single bomb. The pilot reports. The military commanders in Tokyo don't believe it at first. One bomb can't destroy an entire city. It's impossible. But it's true. By afternoon, the Japanese government begins to suspect that the Americans have used some new type of weapon, but they still don't fully grasp what's happened. Meanwhile, the situation in Hiroshima continues to deteriorate. The firestorm is now raging across the ruined city. The fires are creating their own weather, generating winds that fan the flames and make them spread even faster. Anyone too injured to move away from the spreading flames burns to death where they lie. The rivers are full of bodies now. Thousands of people fled to the water, seeking relief from their burns, and either drowned or died from their injuries while partially submerged. Later, when the tide goes out, the riverbanks will be lined with corpses as far as the eye can see. And then there's the radiation, though nobody understands what's happening yet. Some people who seemed relatively uninjured, maybe they were in a shelter, maybe they were just far enough from the blast, start getting sick. They're vomiting, bleeding from their gums and nose. Their hair is falling out. Rescuers who enter the city to help, people who weren't there during the blast, are also getting sick. Why? Nobody knows. It's mysterious, terrifying. This is acute radiation poisoning, but in August 1945, most people have never heard of radiation sickness. Over the coming days and weeks, thousands of people who survived the initial blast will die from radiation exposure. Their internal organs will fail. Their immune systems will collapse. They'll bleed internally until they die. A woman might survive the bombing, seem relatively okay, help rescue efforts for a few days, and then suddenly collapse and die within hours. A child might make it through the initial chaos, only to sicken and die 2 weeks later. The death toll just keeps rising. Let's talk about numbers for a moment, because it's important to understand the scale. The population of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, is estimated at somewhere between 340,000 and 350,000 people. By the end of 1945, approximately 140,000 of them will be dead, about 40% of the population. On the day of the bombing itself, it's estimated that 70,000 to 80,000 people die immediately or within hours. Another 60,000 or so die over the following weeks and months from injuries and radiation sickness. And the deaths don't stop there. For decades afterward, survivors, called hibakusha in Japanese, will die from cancers and other illnesses caused by radiation exposure. The final death toll attributed to the Hiroshima bombing may be as high as 200,000 people. Think about that for a second. One bomb, 200,000 dead. But numbers are just numbers, right? They're abstract. They don't really convey the human cost. So let me tell you about some specific people. There was a mother who was found days after the bombing, dead, her body arched over her infant child. She had shielded the baby with her own body, protecting it from the heat and debris. The baby was still alive when rescuers found them. There was a group of schoolgirls who were working together to create a firebreak when the bomb fell. Out of a group of over 200 students and teachers, only one survived. One. There were entire families. Grandparents, parents, children, wiped out in an instant. Family lines that had existed for generations ended in a flash of light. There were lovers who had planned to marry after the war. One survives, the other doesn't. The survivor spends the rest of their life wondering what if. There's a man who left his house 5 minutes early that morning to avoid missing his train. His entire family died in the bombing. He survived because he was 5 minutes ahead of schedule. There's a woman who was in the basement of a building when the bomb fell. She survived. Her husband was on the upper floor. She never found his body. Every single one of those 140,000 deaths represents a person with hopes, dreams, fears, loved ones. A person with a favorite food, a favorite song, a person who laughed and cried and loved, all of them gone. And the survivors, they're left to pick up the pieces of a shattered world. In the days and weeks after the bombing, Hiroshima is like something out of a nightmare. The city smells like death. The sweet, sickly smell of decaying bodies is everywhere, inescapable. It seeps into clothing, into hair, into the lungs of anyone who enters the ruins. Cremation crews work around the clock, burning bodies in makeshift funeral pyres. But there are too many corpses. They can't keep up. Bodies lie in the streets, rotting in the late summer heat. Disease breaks out, dysentery, typhoid. With so many corpses contaminating the water supply, with sanitation systems destroyed, illness spreads rapidly. Food is scarce. Supply lines into the city have been disrupted. The black market is the only reliable source of nutrition, and prices are astronomical. Orphaned children wander the ruins, scavenging for food, sleeping in the rubble. Many of them will die from malnutrition or disease before the year is out. And still, the radiation continues to kill. Setsuko Thurlow survives the initial blast, but in the weeks afterward, she gets sick. She's vomiting, bleeding, losing her hair. She's convinced she's dying, but somehow she recovers. Many others don't. Her nephew, the 4-year-old boy she adored, was at home when the bomb fell. His body is never recovered. Presumably vaporized or buried under rubble that was never excavated. Akihiro Takahashi, the 13-year-old boy with the terrible burns, survives against all odds. But his recovery takes years. He undergoes multiple surgeries. His face and hands are permanently scarred. He will deal with health problems related to his radiation exposure for the rest of his life. Dr. Hachiya recovers from his injuries and returns to work at the communications hospital. He keeps a detailed diary of the aftermath of the bombing, documenting the suffering and resilience of the survivors. Dr. Sasaki continues working at the Red Cross Hospital, treating patients long after the immediate crisis has passed. He's traumatized by what he's witnessed, but he keeps working because people need him. On August 9th, just 3 days after Hiroshima, the United States drops a second atomic bomb on the city of Nagasaki, killing another 70,000 people. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announces Japan's surrender in a radio broadcast to the nation. For most Japanese citizens, this is the first time they've ever heard the emperor's voice. The war's over. But for the survivors of Hiroshima, in many ways, the suffering is just beginning. Let's fast forward a bit and talk about what happened to these survivors in the years and decades after the bombing. The Hibakusha faced enormous challenges. Physical challenges, certainly. Many carried scars and injuries for life. But also social challenges that might surprise you. In post-war Japan, there was a stigma attached to being a bomb survivor. People feared that radiation exposure might be hereditary, that marrying a hibakusha might result in children with birth defects. This wasn't based on science, it was ignorance and fear. But it was real, and it affected survivors' ability to marry, to find work, to live normal lives. Many hibakusha hid their status for years, afraid of discrimination. There were also psychological wounds. What we now call PTSD was rampant among survivors. Many dealt with survivors' guilt, depression, anxiety. They had nightmares about the bombing for decades. Imagine surviving something like that and then trying to just continue living. How do you go back to normal after witnessing hell on Earth? Some survivors couldn't. Suicide rates among hibakusha were elevated for years after the war. But here's what's remarkable. Many survivors chose to dedicate their lives to making sure nothing like Hiroshima ever happened again. Setsuko Thurlow, that 16-year-old girl who was trapped under rubble, became one of the most prominent anti-nuclear activists in the world. She's in her 90s now, and she still travels the world sharing her testimony, advocating for nuclear disarmament. In 2017, she accepted the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, an organization she helped establish. Akihiro Takahashi became an artist and educator, using his drawings to teach young people about the realities of nuclear war. He created detailed illustrations of what he witnessed that day, preserving the memory for future generations. Dr. Hachiya's diary was published and became one of the most important first-hand accounts of the bombing and its aftermath. These survivors made a choice. They could let their trauma destroy them, or they could use it as fuel to try to change the world. They chose to speak out, even when it was painful, even when people didn't want to hear it, even when governments tried to silence them, because they understood something that's easy for the rest of us to forget. This wasn't just history. This could happen again. We need to talk about the broader implications of Hiroshima, because this is where the story becomes relevant to all of us, right now, today. The atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki marked the beginning of the nuclear age. For the first time in human history, we had the capability to destroy ourselves completely. During the Cold War, the United States and Soviet Union built up nuclear arsenals capable of destroying all human life on Earth multiple times over. At the peak, there were over 70,000 nuclear weapons in existence. We came terrifyingly close to nuclear war on several occasions. During the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, we were literally one decision away from nuclear holocaust. Today, there are still about 13,000 nuclear weapons in the world. The bombs currently in arsenals are far more powerful than Little Boy. Some are over 1,000 times more powerful. If even a small fraction of these weapons were used in a conflict, the results would be catastrophic not just for the targeted countries, but for the entire world. Nuclear winter could kill billions through starvation. And yet, we've become complacent. Most people don't think about nuclear weapons anymore. It's not in the news. It's not part of the daily conversation. But the threat hasn't gone away. If anything, it's getting worse. More countries have nuclear weapons now. The control systems are aging. The political situation is increasingly unstable. And most people alive today have no memory of Hiroshima. They don't viscerally understand what nuclear weapons actually do to human beings. That's why stories like this matter. That's why we need to listen to the survivors while they're still alive to tell their stories. Because Hiroshima isn't just history, it's a warning. Before we wrap up, I want to address something that often comes up in discussions about Hiroshima, the question of whether the bombing was necessary or justified. This is a complex topic, and I'm not going to tell you what to think about it, but I'll give you some context. The traditional American narrative is that the atomic bombs forced Japan to surrender, ending the war and saving lives on both sides by avoiding a costly invasion of the Japanese mainland. Some historians argue that Japan was already on the verge of surrender and that the bombs were unnecessary. Others suggest the bombs were dropped partly as a demonstration of American power to the Soviet Union, a warning shot in what would become the Cold War. There are arguments on all sides, and people still debate this intensely. But here's what's not debatable. The people who died in Hiroshima were overwhelmingly civilians. Not soldiers. Not government officials making war decisions. Mothers, children, elderly people. Regular folks just trying to survive a war they didn't start. And whatever your position on the necessity of the bombing, I think we can all agree that what happened to those people was a tragedy. The question of whether it was a necessary tragedy is one that historians, ethicists, and political scientists will probably continue to debate for as long as humans remember World War II. But what I think we can take from this, regardless of our position on that question, is this. We should do everything in our power to make sure we never have to make such a choice again. Because next time, if there is a next time, the death toll won't be 140,000. It will be millions, maybe billions, and there won't be any debate about whether it was worth it, because there won't be anyone left to debate. Let me bring this back to those survivors. One more time, because I think their message is the most important part of this story. The Hibakusha have spent the last 79 years trying to tell the world, nuclear weapons are not normal weapons. They're not just bigger bombs. They represent something fundamentally different. When you use conventional weapons, even horrible ones like firebombs, you're targeting military objectives or infrastructure. There's a logic to it, however brutal. Nuclear weapons don't discriminate. They destroy everything and everyone within miles. They poison the land for generations. They create suffering that extends far beyond the initial blast. And in the modern world, with intercontinental ballistic missiles and submarine-launched nukes and all the other delivery systems we've developed, a nuclear war could start and end in less than an hour. There would be no time for diplomacy, no time for second thoughts, just the end. The survivors of Hiroshima understand this in a way that the rest of us can't, because they've experienced the reality of nuclear weapons firsthand. They've seen the shadows burned into stone. They've heard the cries of people dying from radiation sickness. They've smelled the stench of a city full of corpses, and they're begging us to listen. Setsuko Thurlow, in her Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, said, "I have a personal, deep connection to every person here. We are made of the same atoms. The same molecules in you were in someone who died in Hiroshima or Nagasaki. We are all connected, and we must work together to ensure this never happens again." That's the message. That's what they want us to understand. We're all connected. What happens to people on the other side of the world matters. The suffering of strangers should move us, and we have a responsibility to make sure that the horrors of Hiroshima are never repeated. So what can we do? What's the takeaway here? First, remember, don't let this become just another history lesson that you forget about next week. The survivors are dying. Soon there will be no one left who directly experienced the atomic bombings. When that happens, the memory will be entirely in our hands. Second, educate yourself. Learn about nuclear weapons, about nuclear policy, about the current state of arms control agreements. This stuff matters, even if it seems abstract. Third, speak up. Support nuclear disarmament efforts. Push back against rhetoric that normalizes the idea of using nuclear weapons. Vote for leaders who take this issue seriously. And fourth, share stories like this. The more people who understand what nuclear weapons really do, the harder it will be for anyone to justify using them. The survivors of Hiroshima have given us a gift, a warning, bought with tremendous suffering. The least we can do is honor that by working to build a world where such weapons are never used again. It's been almost 80 years since that August morning when the world changed forever. Most of the survivors are gone now. The average age of living Hibakusha is over 85. Within the next decade or two, there will be no one left who remembers. But before they're gone, they want us to understand something crucial. This isn't about blame. It's not about making Americans feel guilty or justifying what Japan did during the war. It's about recognizing our shared humanity. It's about understanding that every human being, regardless of nationality or circumstance, deserves to live free from the threat of nuclear annihilation. On August 6, 1945, 140,000 people in Hiroshima learned what it means to face the apocalypse. The rest of us still have time to make sure we never have to learn that lesson ourselves. But only if we choose to listen. Only if we choose to act. Only if we choose to remember. The survivors of Hiroshima have spent their lives shouting a warning into the void. The question is, are we listening? If this story affected you, if it made you think, if it made you feel something, good. That's the point. Don't let that feeling fade. Use it. Let it motivate you to learn more, to care more, to do more. Hit the like button if you think more people need to hear this story. Subscribe if you want to see more content about important historical events that still matter today. And drop a comment below. I want to know what you think. How do we make sure we never forget? What responsibility do we have to the survivors and their message? Share this video. Seriously. Not just because it helps the algorithm, but because this is a story that needs to be told. Your friends, your family, people you go to school with or work with, they need to know this too. And if you want to do more, look up organizations working on nuclear disarmament. Read testimonies from Hibakusha. Visit Hiroshima if you ever get the chance. The Peace Memorial Museum is one of the most powerful experiences you'll ever have. This isn't just history. This is a warning we can't afford to ignore. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. And most importantly, remember Hiroshima, because forgetting would be the greatest tragedy of all. I'll see you in the next video.